U.S. is such a big place. That's something else I had to learn, right? It's a huge country, and there's even cultural differences within this big country. Women kind of like feel like they have to know it all before they start, versus just kind of like, just kind of make a run for it. So I think that's a little bit of that difference there. To the U.S., U.S. banks in particular are looking for, a certain runway of financial history and some sort of level of profitability. It doesn't necessarily need to be net profitability, but like EBITDA positive is something that's typically being looked for. Women still only make up about 29% of manufacturing workers across the U.S. And when you go into the leadership ranks, it's in the single digits.
Welcome to the Westbound podcast. My name is Matthias Oertzen, founder and managing director of the Oertzen Group. Each month, we bring you international business leaders to share their personal and professional journey in North America. Thank you for spending time with us. And now, let's get to it. Welcome to the Westbound podcast, where we serve the European business community. I'm really excited to talk about commercial banking today with Nadine Vaughan, who is the Director and Senior Relationship Manager at BMO Commercial Banking. So welcome, Nadine.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. This is a first for me, so I'm excited.
Oh, that's great. I'm really excited that I have someone who hasn't had media training, because I think my last two guests had media training.
Oh, yeah, no training here.
So that's really good.
What you see is what you get.
That's good. I love that. Absolutely love that. Yeah, so two Germans at a table once again. It's a bit of a pattern for a podcast, but I think that's okay since we speak to probably a mainly German audience. Why don't you start a little bit telling us about where you grew up, where in Germany you're from, and kind of how you made it here?
Okay. So I grew up, and I always say I grew up behind the wall. So East Germany, I always joke I knocked long enough, they finally let me out. So I was actually in a perfect age when the wall came down. So I was around 14. So perfect age to remember the old times, but be able to kind of grow into the new system and the new, structure and everything. So, I grew up in Sachsen-Anhalt, Saxony-Anhalt in English. I was born in the chemistry district of East Germany, so Wolfen, Orwo-Filmfabrik, Bitterfeld, it might be known to many people. And then really the majority of my young life, I lived in Magdeburg, and that's where I went to school. And after high school, I did a apprenticeship at a commercial bank in Braunschweig, Hanover, which is close to where you grew up.
Yep, exactly. And I apologize for your first impression of West Germany being Braunschweig.
Actually, I love Braunschweig.
Okay.
I think Braunschweig is a fantastic city.
Okay,
in fact, if I hadn't moved to the U.S., that's probably where I would have resided, because I actually love the city. Okay. So no apologies necessary. But after my apprenticeship at the Nord-LB, I decided it wasn't time yet for me to take on a full-time job at a bank, and so I decided to go to college. I studied business law back to the roots in Sachsen-Anhalt at the FH Bernburg, and during those college years, I did in my main, what do you call it, Hauptstudium. My major was international trade, and so it was requirement to spend a semester abroad. My professor always said, I don't care what you do, even if you make coffee all day long, but you need to immerse yourself into a new culture, into a new country, speak a different language. Yeah. And so I ended up in Atlanta. So I did in 1999, long time ago. I did an internship with the GACC South in Atlanta. So back then, the GACC was still in Buckhead, and I was one of, 20 different interns, but had a fantastic time, great time, met my first husband during that time, and after I completed college in Germany, we decided it was, for me, to be the one that should move, since I spoke the language and I had already lived here.
Already laid some roots in the U.S., yeah.
Kind of, yeah. So I moved to the U.S. I spent the first 2 years in Virginia, and then in 2004 we had the opportunity to move back to Atlanta. So Atlanta has always been my home away from home. So I was super excited to be able to get back to Atlanta because the place in Virginia where I lived was not Virginia Beach or the cool places. I lived in a little small town in Lynchburg, Virginia. But 2004 moved back to Atlanta and been in Atlanta and Georgia ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. How would you, after all this time has passed, like you think it would have worked bringing your husband to Germany and him assimilating there, or you think the chances were better for you to assimilate here?
Well, I tried. In fact, after college, I was in a contact. They call it a contact circle with the Norddeutsche Landesbank, where I had the opportunity to work during my semester breaks at the bank again, and then also do the trainee program after college. And so I actually had a job offer on the table for a really, really cool job. I could have done the team lead for the International Real Estate Finance Group for NordLB. They were doing all the apartment financing in New York City, like really interesting, cool job. And so I kind of let that on the table, because we've talked back and forth, and I said, hey, why don't you come to Germany? He's like, I never lived in Germany, and I don't speak the language, and I don't, the usual. So it just lent itself that since I had already lived here and I've kind of knew the, map of the road and I spoke the language, that it just made sense for me to move here versus him moving there. So, but the first 6 months were tough because imagine. I came here through the fiancé visa.
So did I. Yeah.
So the first 6 months I didn't have an employment authorization, so I sat basically at home, twisting my thumbs, and that was really hard for me because I've worked since I was 14. I've always worked, and so sitting there for 6 months and not being able to do anything was really, really hard. And that, like the first couple of months, there were a couple of nights where I was sitting at home like, what did I do? Why did I do this? This was stupid. So I
can totally imagine. How was that, if I may ask? We had another guest like a few episodes ago, Anke. I don't know if you know her. She's
Anke Jan.
Anke Jan. Awesome episode. And she was from the East as well. And then she always talked about the cultural difference to West Germany, and then the cultural differences coming to the U.S. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So I know she kind of fled East Germany, right?
She had a crazy story.
It was a really cool story. I don't have a cool story like that. I stayed behind. I lived there until obviously I left for my apprenticeship. But it was an interesting time when the wall came down, right? Because for about a year or so, nobody really knew what was going to go on. I mean, I was in school. So oftentimes, there was the discussion like, okay, what's next? Which school system is going to come into play? Am I supposed to go to a gymnasium or, Realschule? Those didn't exist in East Germany. Right. So it felt very much, it was just kind of like everybody was thinking, oh, everything in East Germany was really bad. And here comes the big brother basically into, from the West,
the big
rescuing,
savior.
The knight on the white horse, saving East Germany. And it really, I think it rubbed people a little bit the wrong way. And to some extent, even 35 plus years later, you still going on, feel a little bit of that animosity a little bit, that the East Germans felt like they were kind of run over a little bit. And what they had accomplished, was essentially, trampled on and broken down in the ashes, and it wasn't worth anything. So I'm always really proud talking about that. The East German Sandmann survived over the West German Sandmann. That's one of the few things, or the Ampelmännchen.
That's true.
So. One of the few things that the West Germans took from East Germany. But that's how it felt very much. So now, certainly I was in an age where it was also exciting, right? Because it was kind of like, ooh, here comes, West Germany. My stepdad, he was in the East German Transit Police for a long time. I didn't get to go to West Germany and experience kind of that first, interaction in West Germany. But it was definitely that cultural shock a little bit. There was absolutely a very different culture that was what was happening. And I remember there was one time I was already in Braunschweig. I was part of my apprenticeship. We were in the Berufsschule, and in my class, they were from all different banks, were bankers in there, and we had 3 East Germans in the class, and the rest was West Germans. And the conversation of employment laws came up, and Mutterschutz, right, maternity leave. Right. And the teacher actually asked in the room, she said, let me just go around, like, when and if you have a child, like, how long are you going to stay home? And so she kind of went around the room, and everybody was like, a year, 3 years, and all of this, and then there was me, and I said 6 months at the most, and it was interesting. All the guys in the room, all the West Germans were like, "Oh my gosh, why would you do this to your child?" And I'm like, "Hold on a second. Well, you're not giving the child every opportunity." And I said, "Hold on." Yeah. I went to kindergarten or kinderkrippe, at 6 months old, or actually sooner than that. And look, I'm sitting where you are sitting. So that's not necessarily the measurement here. Right. But it showed kind of the cultural differences, because it was very normal in West Germany that moms would stay home with their children for, 2-3 years, versus in East Germany, it was very early on. Women were, basically encouraged to go to work. There was, kindergarten was put in place. Like, everybody had a spot they could take their child to, and it was a very different culture for women and women in the workplace versus West Germany.
So actually, to this day, I just listened to something in the news yesterday about some proposed tax law changes in Germany, where for all of Germany right now, the taxation system still really prefers this stay-at-home mom versus a working mom setup. I don't exactly recall the laws that are being changed, but the whole idea is to get the female workforce more involved, and give more people the chance. It has a lot to do with talent shortage, right? We just don't have enough people to fill all the jobs. Yeah, very interesting. And then how is the cultural gear shift coming to the U.S.? I mean, that must have been a big. Can you talk about some of your early experiences? Like maybe also on the banking side, like how things changed for you? How was this different way of doing business?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I first came to the U.S., typical German, I was like, I've seen Americans on TV, and I was like, they're the same. There's not much of a difference. And then I came here, and boy, was I wrong, right? There was, and obviously there's also a huge. I mean, the U.S. is such a big place. That's something else I had to learn, right? It's a huge country, and there's even cultural differences within this big country. So obviously, then coming to the Southeast. Even more so, a very different culture. So, I would say that the biggest challenge for me was the small talk that as a German you're not used to. I remember waiting at the bus stop in the mornings to go to the GACC office, and this guy would walk by and basically say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's going to try to do something to me." Like, oh my gosh, like I can talk to him, right? And so it took some adjusting to do the small talk and do
It's funny that you say that. I had a period in my life where I really leaned into this, like where it almost became American, right? And then I have really backed off again. Like, I still do it, like but it can be too much too. Like where you talk to like every single, for me anyways, like where sometimes there's times when I'm like, I just don't, I'm always courteous. I good morning, it's like, how are you doing? Like the little bit, but you know how people try to get you involved on like talking about football or what college you went to, or people just really enjoy having a conversation with you right away. I'm always friendly, but I don't engage as much anymore as I used to. I think I've returned back to my German roots just a little bit.
Well, actually, the role that I'm in as a relationship manager, right? And then sales and business development.
And professionally, I agree.
Professionally, right? I mean, gosh, I can't tell you how much I talk about football when I don't even, play football. But anyway, I will say, At first it was very weird to me, the whole small talk, and I fell into the pitfall of, when they ask you like, how are you doing? Like, oh, they want to know how I'm doing, and telling them my half of my life story, and then getting the blank stares like, why is she telling me all this stuff? So I think we've all probably been there, done that, and it was a little weird at first, but over the years, I've been here 24 years, I've started embracing it actually, and almost missing it now when I go back to Germany, that I kind of miss a little bit, that are like, hey, just have a smile on your face and just like, have a little small talk, right? And so because the Germans are so
it's the extreme opposite. I agree.
Yes, total opposite. And so and why you have to get used to the fact that when they ask you how you're doing, they really don't care how you're doing. But it kind of puts everybody in a nice, friendly mood of like, okay, let's just have a nice conversation. And so sometimes I feel like the Germans could use a little bit more of that.
I agree.
And like I said, I do miss it a little bit when I go to Germany. And I probably am looked at, like if I go to the grocery store in Germany, I still walk up to the register like, hey, how are you doing? And I get the stares, and it's like, oh, I'm from the U.S., I live in the U.S. Oh, okay. But it's a conversation starter.
That's
and
true.
You do get the Germans to actually start talking, oh, tell me more. And next thing you know, you do have conversations with these German people on the register that normally probably wouldn't spend a minute talking
too much.
to anybody.
Exactly. But except for you have like 3 people behind that are complaining that you're actually talking too much because they want to check out.
Too long to check
exactly.
out. Probably. So no, but I have very much embraced and enjoyed it. And and again, in my professional career, I obviously have to use it. Even though I work with a lot of European companies, I do have U.S. colleagues, and I do have, U.S. CFOs that may work for a German company or whatever. So there's still a lot of that's going on, But I would also say from a banking perspective, cultural-wise, it's just a little bit. I don't know if there's really cultural that much difference other than just the human cultural differences. But I don't know from a banking perspective if culturally there's a huge difference.
For example, are German companies more risk averse? Do you see that? Are they more wanting to pay, out of their own cash flow versus utilizing debt?
Yeah, you
definitely
definitely see that. I mean, it's very uncommon for a German company to come do market entry into the U.S. and going out there and saying, we want all these loans and there's. You see a lot of times they really emphasize on the fact that, we'll finance this new production facility out of our own cash flow, or we already have a plan in Germany. So yes, there's definitely that a cultural difference in terms of being very much debt adverse, and even like the conversations around credit cards are very different, right? I
think to this day, I don't know if this is true, you may know this better than I do, but I think to this day, if you are getting credit cards as like a regular individual in Germany, they're gonna make you tie it to your account and have you pay the balance, right?
I think from a personal perspective, that's still how it is. Yeah. But, credit cards are not a common form of payment for businesses in Germany. I mean, even for individuals, but even for businesses, it would wouldn't be, exactly, versus here in the U.S. And oftentimes I do have clients that come and like, we don't need credit cards. And I'm like, you probably will need them. You may not think you do, but I'm telling you, you will need them at some point if you have Salesforce here, or you have a CFO that might be traveling quite a bit, or a CEO or whatever, and at some point they don't want to use their personal credit cards, and so you will have to think about this, right? And that is definitely a cultural difference of getting used to that form of payment on a corporate side versus in Germany they would never think twice about putting a corporate credit card out there.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we actually advise the companies not to issue credit cards to the employees, but to have the employees expense, just for the very reason of for one, you can sell it here as in, you can collect your own rewards, which a lot of U.S. employees really like. And then the other part
the
is...
only issue you have is when you have an employee who is not able to get a sufficient credit limit, and then they run into issues. And I think there are some perks of why a corporate credit card is actually good for a company. So, you get a working capital benefit that you would otherwise not get, especially for a European-based company who, wouldn't have any lines of credits or whatever. I mean, you have a little bit of that working capital delay that comes between, having to pay these credit cards. So that's one thing. If you have sufficient spend on your card, you earn a rebate, and sometimes you can utilize that to, pay for a new ERP system, or finance the company Christmas party, or do other employee, retreat perks, whatever it may be. So there's a couple of different benefits that you should think about as a corporate employee, but you have to have certain parameters in place from a security perspective, making sure that employees are not misusing it. But there's so many things you can do now.
Setting limits.
You can set limits. You can set different merchant codes. So like, if you want to say
merchant codes, interesting. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So, for example, right, if you have a sales guy that's traveling all over the U.S. and you want him to use that card only to purchase flights and hotels and restaurants, then you can set those merchant codes to prevent him from walking into a Best Buy and buying a laptop on company business, right? So you can set those, and you can change them real time if they call and say they're having an issue and they need a laptop, right? And then the administrator can go in real time, change the merchant codes, have them buy the computer, and then close it back up. So there's a lot of control mechanisms in place to prevent misuse of corporate credit cards.
We'll change our advice and say either use employee expensing or call Nadine.
There you go.
That's perfect.
I like it.
Yeah. Let's back up a little bit, because I would love for people to know who BMO is and what your role within BMO is, and the clients that you serve. Get us a little bit started on that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I think I told you earlier, right? BMO in the Southeast is not very well known. If you go to other parts of the U.S., definitely people know who BMO is, but maybe I'll kind of start a little bit at the beginning. So BMO is a Canadian bank, originally 200-plus-year-old bank, so very, very long, old-standing bank. And in the early 80s, from a commercial banking perspective, BMO bought Harris Bank out of Chicago. So that was kind of the first step into the U.S. commercial banking business. So if you go to Chicago, you will see a BMO branch on every corner, and people usually know who BMO is. And then in the mid-90s, they bought M&I Bank in the Midwest, and so we have really significant market share there. And about 8 years ago, the bank decided that the Southeast is a really interesting geography, and really there's a lot of clients that we could serve. And so the office was opened by my boss, Chris McDade, 8 years ago. And 4 years ago, he finally convinced me to come over and join the bank. And so and then 3 years ago, we also bought Bank of the West. So we now have kind of the coverage area in the California, Arizona, within that geography. And we are now the 8th largest bank in North America by assets. When you break it down to the commercial bank, we're actually the 4th largest commercial bank. If you look at kind of loan volumes in commercial banking customers. So really one of the large commercial banking players in North America. And where that's really important is, we have all the capabilities that all the big names that everybody typically knows that first comes to the U.S., we can serve all of those needs. But where I would say we differentiate ourselves is we have a true middle market focus. So really that typical Mittelstand, that's the type of clientele that we work with. And that was also a driving influence in my decision to make the move to BMO 4 years ago, because that is really the market segment and client profile that I've I've enjoyed working with for the last, almost 30 years now. Because it's, as a banker, it kind of feels like you a little bit have that advisory role versus just being an order taker, right? So I want the CFO or CEO of a company to call me and say, hey, we're kind of thinking about this from a strategy perspective. How do you think about this? What should we take into consideration from a financing, banking perspective until you become a partner? More so than just kind of like, okay, that's just somebody that opens up our bank accounts kind of deal, right? And so that's what I enjoy, and that's really where I will say we differentiate compared to some of our other big players in the market.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You told me over lunch that since the Canadian bank that had really developed that kind of expertise, for those Canadian mid-size SME kind of companies, and that it was really easy to transfer that into some of the European clients that you serve. Is there a specific like industry focus you work on? Is this like engineering type firms, like machine builders, or is it?
So I would say the way we are structured is we kind of have that local market presence. So myself in the Southeast, I spend a lot of times in the Carolinas, obviously in Georgia, but we service even the other southern United States. And then we bring kind of some industry expertise to it. So we don't say we can play in every single industry, but we have certain industries that we are experts in. Just to name a few that might be of interest, like the engineering construction industry, we have a big focus in, and we have a specialty team for that. The metals sector is a big one. Food and consumer, manufacturing is also a big one. We also have a big technology team. So those are probably just kind of like maybe a handful of like bigger industry areas that we are focused in. And with me, I was really interested over the fact that we had that manufacturing focus, because over the years, working with a lot of the multinationals, a lot of them that come into the U.S. are typically manufacturers within different specialty industries.
Yeah, that's also our bread and butter. I mean, those are the clients that we serve.
Yeah, and so it was nice to see that BMO kind of has that specialty focus in the manufacturing world, so that was one of the couple of different driving factors of why I joined BMO 4 years ago.
Yeah, very good. Do you guys offer equipment financing as well?
Yeah.
Absatzfinanzierung, those kind of,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, I just had a conversation yesterday with a German manufacturer. One of the things, because we have that manufacturing focus, there are some specialty financing solutions out there for manufacturers that a lot of people are not aware of. So the industrial revenue bond financing is just one of those examples where you kind of get a break in your interest rate. So essentially the bank provides a discount on your interest rate based on their own tax rate. And it's kind of like a construct with the local government agencies, so for manufacturing projects. And that can be both new projects as well as expansion projects. So for example, you have a manufacturer that wants to expand and they want to bring in some new machinery and equipment. That typically qualifies them for kind of that IRB financing, where they can get a reduced interest rate. And that can be a lot of times something that's really interesting to.
So let me ask you some simple questions so I comprehend. Yeah. So what I think I heard was that the locality wherever this plant is being built or expanded will give a reduced tax rate to the bank, which the bank in turn gives a reduced interest rate on equipment. Is that
essentially that's kind of how it works? Okay. Yeah. In layman's term, kind of how you can think about it. Yeah. So whatever the taxable rate is that the bank has as a taxpayer, that rate reduction, the bank passes it on through kind of that IRB construct.
Great, and that's the municipality or the community deciding, hey, we want to attract manufacturing, and therefore we do this. That's fantastic. Do you know specific localities that are known for this?
You can, I think, and I don't want to speak, I'm not the subject matter expert.
We can put it in the show notes if you have a document with show notes.
Yeah. We can send, I can send you something that we can put absolutely in the show notes for that. But it's super interesting. What I will say though is, it's not for everyone,
No,
right?
of course
And it's
not.
not for every project.
Always call you first, and then you can see.
Well, and it's also the size cost benefit you need to think about. Like if somebody has a project that's like a $500,000 equipment expansion project, a lot of times by the time you're done with legal fees to set up like these really, strict agreements, obviously whenever you have the government involved, it does flow into certain documentation, and the attorneys have to make their part of it too. It doesn't make sense for a small expansion like that to kind of go and have to incur that legal expense that comes with it, right? Yeah. But if you have a larger project, it can absolutely be something that's
I'm thinking
interest.
Specifically of site selection projects over $50 million.
Absolutely.
Like we just talked about Rubis that was significantly more, but then there's so many others, and a lot of them do choose the Southeast, their right to work states, employment, like cost of living is less expensive. I think the Midwest is another big place where they go, which you guys are very strong in the Midwest as well. That's very
and you can do it. You can do it. I think in probably any jurisdiction there might be a few that may have some sort of exemption, and there are some ceilings from a size perspective. So it's both on the bottom as well as on the ceiling. So I think up to 10 million or so is kind of where that comes into play. If you do projects that are larger than that, it may be a combination of tax-exempt and non-tax-exempt financing. But,
very interesting. Yeah, so these market entrants that come to the U.S., right, they always have the Bonität is a German word, credit worthiness issue. How does BMO kind of help with that?
Yeah. I will say a lot of the Europeans come in and typically they don't look for financing, right? I mean, especially the German mindset is very much the parentship is in control. We'll finance that for the parent company. And that's actually okay. And it's probably the better way to go, especially in the early years. Because when you do come into the U.S., U.S. banks in particular are looking for, a certain runway of financial history and some sort of level of profitability. It doesn't necessarily need to be net profitability, but like EBITDA positive is something that's typically being looked for from a banking perspective. There are some exemptions of how you can think about it where oftentimes I hear like a German company come in and like, we're a 500 million euro global company and we have been in business for 100 years and can you not just, look at us? And so you can certainly, utilize the parent through a parent guarantee. There's other constructs through standby letters of credits and bank guarantees of banks that perhaps the parent company works with. There's different ways of how you can skin that cat. What I will always tell companies is you have to kind of weigh that cost benefit, right? Does it make sense if you want $1 million line of credit for your U.S. business to really go through that process and the legal expense associated with putting these type of constructs in place? It doesn't always make sense. So you really have to weigh that cost benefit a little bit. And there's some European companies that come in here and they say, we always want to have the control. We'll finance it for the parent no matter what. And then we have some, very few, but they come in place like as soon as the U.S. entity can stand on its own, we want to put their own financing in place. And it just depends on how the company thinks about their financing and capital structure. And every company is a little bit different there. It's definitely a challenge if somebody comes into the U.S. thinking about like we want them to stand on their own feet. The banking market per se is not very open to that in terms of credit because there's not that financial history out there. There are some non-bank lenders out there, but again, it's typically much more expensive to obtain that type of financing.
So really the recommendation would probably be intercompany loan in the first few years and then maybe start with some small financing like a company car, right? Have a company credit card, build your credit. Then out of curiosity, how does it work then on when you guys evaluate a client for their credit worthiness? Do you also go to Equifax and these credit bureaus? Do they report on the company structure itself?
On the commercial side, typically not.
How do you pull credit on them?
So we don't really pull credit per se. We really look at their financial statements.
So
I think on the
P&Ls
smaller business banking side, they they look at Equifax is not the one, but the DNB report, for example, comes into play. On the commercial side, that's less of a story for us. On the commercial side, it's typically we look at the company's financial statements. We'll look at maybe the parent financials, making sure that the parent doesn't suck all the money out when we just lend to the U.S. entity.
I know a few of those.
yeah, and then it happens, and then you have to build the construct around it. So there's different ways of doing that. But yeah, for the commercial side, it's less of the DNB side, but that comes more into play on the small business banking side. I will say, credit card, because it is such a big topic in the U.S. and even a lot of German companies come into the country and say, well, we don't put corporate credit cards out there, and then they realize fully quickly, like, oh, we kind of have to. Like, how do we do that? I will say most of the time we'll do it through cash collateral. So there's like a cash collateral gets put in place until the company gets to a point where they have kind of its own financial statements, and then you can kind of release that cash collateral.
So very much then the personal
very
side.
Much like
we all did it, right?
We all did the cash secured credit card from a personal perspective, and it works very similar on the company side too. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I love that insight on the. For someone who's in a site selection process, anything like that's very, very interesting and helpful to our community. You're super involved in the German American community. I know you were on the board of the German school here in Atlanta. We both have children, so we just talked about this. You are very involved with the German American Chamber of Commerce. Tell us a little bit about your community involvement.
Yeah, again, I was on the board of the German School of Atlanta for almost 11 years. By virtue of my daughter started when she was 3 years old, and it really made a difference, right? She's now a sophomore in college, and she is fully bilingual. She's actually completed 2 internships in Germany. She speaks with an American accent, but, she speaks German. She understands everything. The cultural piece is very, very important too, and that's what I always liked about the German school. It wasn't just about the languages; it was also about teaching the kids about the German culture. Whether it's the Laternenumzug on St. Martin's or Nikolaus Day, those are the kind of like things we grew up with, right? And so passing that on to our children is kind of cool.
Did you have Laternenumzug in the East too?
Of course,
okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry. Probably ignorant question, but I didn't know. Okay,
no, we did.
Okay, so same.
Yeah, we did have St. Martin's.
So I guess we all had this together. Then we got separated for a minute, and then now we have it together again.
Yeah.
Okay,
there was definitely some that are overlapping for sure.
Okay, good. Okay.
We also had Nikolaus Day in East Germany too.
Okay. Okay, good.
But I think where the difference comes in is Christmas. Like, right, some areas in Germany they have the Christmas angel.
Well, I think that's more like Catholic versus Lutheran.
Christkind versus Weihnachtsmann, right?
Yeah.
Nikolaus.
Now we really get into the Catholics versus the Lutherans, Protestants. Yeah, that's usually very different.
Well, there was also a big cultural difference in Germany, East Germany versus West Germany.
Yeah.
It's kind of the church, right, piece to it.
Yeah, that's probably a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. We'll save that for the next episode.
I know, exactly. Yeah, super interesting though.
So I spend a lot of time there, and the way I always approach my community involvement is like I don't sit on like 3 different boards. I choose one cause that I'm really passionate about, that I want to really focus on and really get involved with, and I don't mind rolling up my sleeves and really spending a lot of time on it. And so when my children were kind of outgrown out of the German school, and it kind of was time for me, like, okay, it's time for other people to come up. 11 years is a long time, although there were some board members that have been on the board, for 20-some years. So shout out to my fellow board members from the German school. But when I joined BMO too, and because of the manufacturing focus that BMO had, one of my colleagues came to me. She said, hey, with your manufacturing focus, you should join this organization called Women in Manufacturing. And I hadn't heard of the organization, even though I was so involved with manufacturing, but I've never heard of it. And so BMO had been a supporter of the organization from the very early years on. And so I said, yeah, check it out. And so here we are 4 years later, and I'm now on the board of the Georgia chapter for women in manufacturing. Have really gotten very heavily involved with that kind of ecosystem of manufacturing, but also in particular women. Women are still very, very underrepresented within the manufacturing sector, and so it's a big passion of mine. Obviously, I work in a very male-dominated industry. There's not a lot of female bankers either, so it's a big passion of mine. And so, when I had the opportunity to join the board, I did, and it's been a fantastic run, and I really enjoy that community.
Is it a national organization?
It is a national organization. Was started by a woman named Alison Grialis in 2010. I think 2010, 2011. In fact, they just celebrated last year their 15th anniversary, so it would be 2010. And she grew up in manufacturing in Ohio. Her father was in manufacturing, and so when she worked in the manufacturing sector, she went to conferences and she realized, I'm the only woman, and I need to connect with more women in the space. And she was searching for an organization, women in manufacturing, and couldn't find one. So she created one, and awesome. And it has really grown over the years. And it was initially kind of that national organization with national event, and then more and more as more corporate members and more individuals joined, there was a lot of call out for like, hey, we want to have the opportunity to connect on a local basis. And so that's when chapters started to be created. The organization now has 35 state chapters across the U.S., and they are starting to do some international outreach as well, obviously with a lot of the larger corporate members being international manufacturers. They have sites in Mexico and the UK and Germany. And so, in fact, the first international event actually took place in Hamburg, I think, in 2 years ago. So that was the first international event that they had. So,
that's very cool. I mean, obviously, manufacturing is still super male-dominated. And have you seen it change over your involvement with the organization? Well,
I think the manufacturing sector has a big challenge in terms of talent. There's a lot of unfilled spots in especially on the manufacturing line, and I think manufacturers in general won't get around to looking at other diversity groups in order to fill those empty spots. And so there's definitely been a little bit of that push of reaching out to other demographics that have maybe historically not been the common manufacturer employee. Women still only make up about 29% of manufacturing workers across the U.S. And when you go into the leadership ranks, it's in the single digits. So there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, but it is shifting a little bit. The organization like WIM is certainly one that's trying to help that cause a little bit, and it not only attracting more women to the space, but then once they do join the manufacturing world, it's also a matter of like giving them an environment where they can thrive, where they can build a career, and where they can feel comfortable. And so WIM is trying to change a lot of that. But I think by virtue of, if you look at kind of the corporate members that are joining WIM and have joined WIM over the last couple of years, they're recognizing that, right? So you have really big corporate names. I mean, if I think just about Georgia, Southwire is a big corporate member, Altium Packaging, a big manufacturer with 60 plants across the U.S. and Canada, Hoshisaki, a Japanese-owned, YKK, another Japanese-owned big manufacturer here in Georgia. They all are corporate members of WIM because they recognize the importance of attracting more of that female talent to the manufacturing space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do executive search and professional recruitment, and we've had some executive assignments in the manufacturing world where it was a clear mandate that our introduction matrix should include female candidates. And what we have found, they were the ones that you do find, they're rare. There's not very many, hence your statistics. And that we do find are highly qualified, super highly qualified, very well paid as well. And unfortunately, most of the time, it ended up being a male candidate that got selected in the end. So it's, I think also it's not just wanting the candidates on the candidate, but on the introduction matrix, but also maybe having the courage to go ahead and actually hiring the person. Would probably be advisable. What would you recommend, or what kind of advice would you give ladies coming up in the manufacturing community, how to best navigate this environment?
I think it's the same advice I would give a banker or in any industry. I think women have the tendency of wanting to check all of the boxes in order to apply for a position, for that next role, right, to build their career.
Very German in that regard.
Very German in that regard, yes. And they kind of, if they don't check all the boxes, they just simply don't apply. Versus the male colleagues, say, oh, I checked 50% of the boxes. Hell yeah, I'm going to go apply for that job. I can learn the rest, right? And so it's a little bit of that different thought process. Women kind of like feel like they have to know it all before they start, versus just kind of like, just kind of make a run for it. So I think that's a little bit of that difference there. And I think women need to be more brave to just kind of go for it, even if they don't check all the boxes, because that's what their male colleagues do, right? But it's hard to kind of change a little bit, but I don't think that's specific to the manufacturing industry. It's everywhere. But I would say that's my biggest advice I would get, just go for it.
Courage.
Yeah. Courage, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's awesome. I like
it.
And
there's a quote that I love, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, so I can't give the source of it. It goes
in the show notes.
We need to put it in the show notes. Yeah. I'll find it who said it. But if you want a seat at the table and there is no seat, just bring a folding chair and make yourself a seat on the table, right? And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, I've got 3 girls and 2 boys, and the message I give them is actually the same. All of you, all 5, courage is so important. Like I started my own business about 6 years ago, that was very uncertain. And I was like, okay, here we go, just roll the dice and try,
It's interesting that actually there's a lot of female business founders, and especially over the last couple of years. And one of the reasons why is because in corporate America, they're not feeling heard and they're not feeling seen, and they don't feel like they get the same opportunities as their male colleagues. And it gets even, the statistics go even down when you look at African American and other diversity groups. But a lot of women have been leaving corporate America for especially those reasons and starting their own businesses. And female founders are definitely on the rise, but then they're facing the issue of female founders don't get the same kind of attention when it comes to investments, right? And finding the capital, and that's still definitely very underserved too. Yeah. So it's in all different ranks of life where female talents are definitely facing some I feel like higher hurdles or higher walls than perhaps their male colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, we have the majority women in my organization, and
good for you.
That's working out really well. So we're actually looking to hire some male candidates to even it out just a little bit. I wanted to go back really quick to you're responsible for Southeast, right?
Yes.
That's okay. And then we've seen a very large influx of specifically industrial manufacturers, going through a site selection process. Yep. And then choosing the Southeast in the end. They always look at everything, right, with the site selection networks, but they end up choosing the Southeast. What do you think specifically draws them to the Southeast?
I think the southeastern United States, the state governments and economic development authorities have done just a fantastic job really marketing the states, whether it's South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee. They've all done a really, really great job attracting that foreign direct investment into their states. The at-will to work states versus, unionized type setups and structures is definitely attractive. For the European business, obviously the close proximity to Europe. We have the busiest airport in the world here in Atlanta.
With additional parking soon.
You got the Savannah port, you got the port of Charleston. So those are all kind of like all reasons of why this is a really attractive geography for foreign direct investment. But I would say the biggest changer or game changer has absolutely been what the different states are doing, whether it's tax incentives, whether it's providing kind of land and real estate for these manufacturers to come in and build. And the biggest challenge because of all of that is bring that workforce in, right? And so having that workforce available. And I was just at a conference in Charlotte last week with a lot of, SMEs, European SMEs, and I will say that's still the biggest challenge that all of them are facing is that workforce and finding the workforce and not just attracting it, but retaining it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's that's very much our business. And then if I could find out a way to fill blue-collar positions, I would be retired in 3 years. We
just need to get you attached to more women in manufacturing.
I guess that's certainly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of. I think it's going to play a big role in Germany. That's going to play a big role here. You got to get everybody. We just need people to work. You know, it's. And then that's how we look at our recruiting. Anyways, it doesn't matter what race, color, religion. We're looking at, can you do the job? Are you qualified? Do you fit the profile? And then let's go, and the rest the client decides. Yeah. What's really interesting to me is since you are involved with these site selection, companies inbound to the U.S. Like, how do you usually see? Like, at what point do you come in as a banker? Like where? Tell me a little bit about that. How does that usually work?
Yeah.
Are you das folgende Gewerbe, or are you?
Well, I would say it's once again, it's the community that we've built in the Southeast, which has been a big driving factor. But I always joke, it's like when a company decides to come to the US, the first thing they need is the lawyer to create the business or create the entity. Then you need a Steuerberater, tax CPA, right, that helps with the taxes. And usually the third thing is like, we need a bank account. And so I work with a lot of, the site selection guys, the attorneys, the CPAs that kind of come before me. And a lot of times what happens is the clients are like, I need a bank account. Who do I ask? So working with a lot of those community partners has made a big difference. And they're looking for a reliable partner on the banking side too, right? Because they're putting their good name forward when they make a recommendation, and so when something goes not so good and the experience for the client is not ideal, it kind of falls back on them. So they're definitely looking for a partner that they can rely on. And I think we talked a little bit about this being a Canadian bank. We weren't always kind of the first one to be thought of, but when I explained the fact that we have, because we've helped for many, many years, these Canadian companies come into the US and establish bank accounts that they need of varying sizes. And we just can easily duplicate that to, pretty much almost every country, that these businesses are coming from. That's been a big differentiator. And the fact that, all of our bank opening and bank management, everything is digital. Like, I still hear about a company, working with perhaps a different bank or starting initially, and then it's like, we need the CEO to come in and sign the signature card or come in to make changes to the bank account. Well, guess what? The CEO is in Germany. He or she can just come and fly in from Germany to sign a signature card. So everything is digital, which really helps. I still have a lot of clients where I deal with the finance team in Germany. They're the ones managing the accounts here in the US. And so it works really seamlessly. And we can support really the small kind of startup business that probably will never be more than $1 million or $2 million in annual revenue, all the way to the big ones that are building the big, manufacturing facilities here, and eventually, plan on growing to the $100+ million in revenue side, and our accounts can kind of grow with them. So
yeah, perfect.
It's been definitely helpful.
I have a question too. Is like, I knew a few Canadians, and what I have always found is that when you, and I know the US very well now because I've lived here over 21 years, and it's interesting how much closer the Canadian mindset is to the European mindset. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's like the US is really a bubble. Like, I'm married to an Argentinian, they're closer to our mindset, even though they're very different, but they're closer. Like when it comes to just the way, maybe starts with looking at the weather, you look at the entire world and not just your own country, right? Or like you like soccer, right? Or international artists. Like where in the US, not like these people don't exist in the US, but there is also a large part of the population that just literally their life only happens within the United States. So that's interesting because I think if is this the same experience you've had with Canadians? Or?
Yeah, I definitely feel like they're thinking more like Europeans. I mean, if you think about it, their social system is very similar to the social system in Germany, right? Healthcare is very similar. In fact, I have a colleague who is going on maternity leave next week. She's going to be gone for a year, and that's just very normal, right? In the U.S., I'll be back in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it is, right? So that system is very similar to the European system, and so I think that's why the mindset is very similar. So yeah, people always think like, oh, Canadians, US is all the same. It's just like me coming from Germany thinking the Americans are like the Germans. No, it's not.
It's not.
But yeah, there's definitely cultural differences. But I think that also makes it really interesting because, BMO, we I would say our business is now 50% is US and 50% is Canada. And so I don't know exactly the employee splits, but 53,000 plus employees, I would think we'll probably half and half. So it's interesting working with the Canadians sometimes. And sometimes I'm almost too American now because I'm kind of like, because they're thinking,
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I'm like, no, like let's get it done, right? So I do experience that, but because we also have a lot of German businesses that then do not only business in the US, but they want to do business in Canada. It makes it really easy because as a Canadian bank, we have kind of that seamless, product offering and this seamless accounts. They can all work it from the same platform versus they wouldn't get that with a US
Interesting.
bank.
No, you just got to get Mexico in there and then you have the trifecta.
Then we would be like,
I know. So much
Unbeatable.
German business there as well. And then it's interesting how they interact. I see more and more now that the control over North America and South America gets given to the U.S. entity. I see this more and more within our clients. That in the past, what I've seen a lot was that no, we'll go ahead and handle Mexico out of Germany, and then U.S. CEOs like, why are we doing this? We're like much closer. Like we can have people in Texas actually traveling there. I'm there faster, so I see this more and more that. That's happening that way.
And I think it's because too, if you look at what's happening in Germany, not to get into the politics, definitely don't want to go there.
No,
but
let's not do that.
But Germany as a geography that's business friendly is having a hard time right now, and so you start seeing it both the larger corporations as well as the Mittelstand. They are shifting more and more of their business to either the U.S. or some other geographies where it's easier to do business in, and so Wirtschaftsstandort Germany is definitely is kind of on that verge of we need to do something or we are absolutely losing that advantage, and if we're not only already too far gone, but we are starting, even on the banking side, I'm starting to see a lot of that shifting where the Germans or really all European companies are really shifting more into the US market, because even though you have some of the political differences and some of those things, it is still very much a geography where it's very much easier to do business in. If you understand it and you understand the cultural differences and you understand kind of the nuances of how to do business here, and you surround yourself with the right community partners to really understand that, and I think it's much easier to do business in the US.
I totally agree. My advice would always be to the companies, just tune out the noise on the top. You'll be doing business on the state level anyways. In fact, you'll be filing taxes in many states. And if you start looking at the people in the US, they're not, they're great people, they're motivated people, they're welcoming, friendly, for the most part hardworking. And I think there's lots of opportunities. Great taxation, just the bureaucrative system is much slimmer. The auditing system is much slimmer. I mean, to just start or stop something, whether it be employee or business or a new venture or whatever it is, it's just all faster. And so if a company were to look at the news, read the German newspapers. I still am in touch with them, but it's then I would just implore you to call some people that are in the country, ask them, ask your customers, go to some trade shows, I get this over and over and over for people that travel here for business. Like, I was told all this stuff. I won't be able to come into the U.S. I won't be able to leave the U.S. I won't be able to get a visa. I won't be able to get this and that. And then I come here and it's a completely different story. So don't listen to all the noise, and just focus on making good money decisions. And the U.S. is one of the greatest places to do business.
And I would say the key is getting with the right partners. We had a panel discussion just last week, and it was 2 companies that entered the U.S. at different stages. One company in Georgia that was headquartered in Hamburg, one company that is headquartered in the south of Germany, and they moved into South Carolina 4 years ago, and they were talking a little bit about some of the hurdles that they experience, and one of the big takeaways was like, you got to make sure you're with the right partners that can guide you kind of through that startup process and advise you accordingly, and may hopefully save you from some of the pitfalls, and people that have been doing it for a long time and have been here for a long time. And it's kind of that mix of, the German community, but also embracing the Americans, even on the workforce side, right? It's not all about just bring all the Germans in and they just tell the Americans how to do it. That's, it's a huge mistake, right? It's kind of, you got to find that right medium. And so there was a lot of discussion around that, but it's really finding that community. And I would say that's one of the reasons why the Southeast is such a great geography to do business in, right? That's because the community here is huge and everybody's so willing to support each other. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. I think this is a really cool note to end our time on. So I really wanted to thank you for coming. It was really a great conversation. Is there anything that you would like to let our listeners know? Any initiatives that BMO has? Anything you would like to share?
Yeah, I would say, the biggest takeaway from a banking perspective for companies that enter the United States or have already been in the United States and then looking to expand perhaps their business is make sure you have the right banking partner. And even if you perhaps made a mistake and you come to realize perhaps the first bank that I onboarded with at the beginning wasn't perhaps the right partner because they don't have the right capabilities or they are unable to kind of support that foreign ownership piece, don't be afraid to go talk to somebody else. Don't wait until you're kind of in a full expansion mode when you really don't have time to switch banks or when you really don't have time to onboard bank accounts. And for the newly entering into the U.S. market, don't think that bank accounts can get opened within overnight, within a day. It takes time, so don't wait to take the bank into your consideration. So listen to your CPAs and attorneys, get your bank accounts as soon as you can. As soon as you have your employee ID number, get the bank accounts.
Yep, I'm in favor of
call me.
Yeah, that's right. Call Nadine, and I'm in favor of all of this because this is required to pay an employee, and which I hopefully would be able to find for you.
So you're number 4 in the chain.
Or 6 or 7, who knows? Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much again. We will link your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so people can get a hold of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I would love if you could leave us some comments, some guest suggestions. We would love any kind of feedback. And once again, thanks for tuning in.